This episode of The Move is sponsored by our friends over at Dwell. If you want a fantastic, amazing, deep, and profound experience in the Bible through an audio app, why not consider Dwell? Listeners of The Move get 30% off a lifetime subscription to the app called Dwell. Understand why many people have used this as their Bible app of choice, why Kickstarter hails it as one of the top performing programs of all time. It's because people are finding Dwell and they're loving it. The experience is fantastic. Go to dwellapp.io/themove for 30% off. Welcome back to The Move. We're vibing through the book 10 minutes at a time. I'm your host, Justin Khoe, and in today's episode, we're talking about that one time in the Bible that Jacob actually ends up adopting a bunch of pagan kids. If you're wondering, what are we looking at? Genesis chapter 48, verses 1 through 22. It is a little bit of a sad time. I want to acknowledge it. We're going to be doing this on in the next several episodes because it is the last time that Pastor Benjamin Williams is going to be guesting on, this series of The Move. We'll probably have him back on future episodes, but this is the last one for this season. And Ben, I just want to say on behalf of everyone, a huge thank you for just being an awesome contributor to The Move. It's been such a fantastic journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I feel like I've learned a lot and I've enjoyed journeying through Genesis. I feel like I know Genesis now in a much more intimate way,
Absolutely. And I think that this is one of those things that people don't realize is how much we learn as we're shooting the episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a very real thing. And it's been really fun because I've been able to run into a handful of people who have turned The Move into this daily practice or somewhat daily practice, right? And they're saying, oh, I'm learning so much. This just is blowing my mind. It's like, yeah, us too. There's something that happens when you set time aside for scripture and just dive into it. You actually learn something and the Holy Spirit teaches you. And it's really, really fun to be able to experience that firsthand with you. So, Hey, Ben, as we dive into the episode, you and I had a conversation on when we were playing video games. You and I play video games a couple times a week. But those episodes, not those episodes, but those sessions when we're playing games oftentimes turn almost into podcast content in the sense that we're talking about real things and deep things. You and I had a conversation, I believe, once about the idea of adoption because you are about to get married. And I asked you hey, what are your thoughts on having kids? Is this something that you're interested in? If I remember correctly, one of you two, I forget if it was you or your fiance, was more open to the idea of adoption. Is that fair?
Well, I think that both of us are pretty open to adoption, whether or not we decide to have biological children, if we do or if we don't. I think adoption is something that we're both very interested in, definitely.
Oh, that's cool. The last couple of months I've been working with a nonprofit organization called Child Impact International. And one of the things that I've been forced to do via my role is to interview people who are making a difference with exploited children around the world. And it looks different ways in different interviews and people are doing different things. But one of those themes that's showing up are people who run homes for children that are abandoned or abused. And these themes of adoption show up a lot. And it was just kind of funny because that we launched the Digital Missionary Academy recently, and it was a very successful launch, and it has us thinking about the future. Oh my goodness, maybe online ministry isn't just the crazy faith journey that it has been for years. Maybe this could actually be sustainable. And Emily was I think her actual word was man, if things continue to go well, maybe we'd actually be in a position to adopt. And so it's just one of those things man, because it feels so far away. It feels so impossible to do that. You read the articles, it's tens of thousands of dollars to adopt a child or maybe even more. I don't know. And so just to be in a space where maybe this is one of our next ministries is something like that. Just kind of exciting, a little bit scary at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And something that I've always loved about adoption, and maybe people that have biological children will push back on this, and that's okay. It's just the idea that somebody who is adopted was chosen versus a biological child at some level, you kind of rolled the dice.
Yeah.
or maybe didn't even mean to roll the dice if you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying.
And this kid is just kind of what you got, and you're gonna love him, and you do love him, and that's fantastic. But there's something almost different and even elevated in love of choice or parenting of choice. And just like you're saying, man, for you guys to adopt would be a huge ordeal. financially, emotionally, socially, like in every single way. And for you to choose to do that and then find a child and say, this is the child that I actually want to take in. Like, I want to give the gift of my presence and take them as a gift of myself. I think there's something beautiful about it. And yeah.
No, there's absolutely something beautiful about it. And it makes me think back to season 1 of the move. Jonathan and I, were covering the book of Romans, and this theme of adoption showed up. And he was making a point that adoption in the kind of Greco-Roman era was a much bigger deal than it was kind of how we kind of understand it. It was more than just, okay, you're part of my family now.
Yeah.
There was like an actual like transference of actual authority and birthright. Like there was like you would actually even adopt your own children in a certain respect back in those days. And so when I hear themes of adoption, I think it is fair to say, like, even though I have my own kid and I very much wanted to have Mateo and very much love him, I don't know. I think you're onto something. I think it is fair to say that if I were to adopt, there is, not that it's more or less, maybe that's the wrong way to look at it, but there is an added layer of consideration that decision is one that's much more well thought out. And maybe that's something worth looking at, because sometimes we make the right decision when we think about it, and other times we make the right decision kind of like just on accident. And it's the right decision, period. It's not a big deal, but the ones that you have to carefully weigh and intentionally make a decision, there's a different kind of experience with that. So anyways, the reason why I bring this all up is because there's a story here that we're looking at, Genesis chapter 48. Jacob basically adopts Joseph's children. So if you have been following the narrative thus far, of course you have been following the narrative, you're in episode 90 or whatever this one is, right? Joseph went to Egypt. He had a whole family. Now he's been reunited with his father, but he had a handful of kids in Egypt with an Egyptian bride. And the kids are Manasseh and Ephraim. And the text actually goes to the extent to say that Jacob now is more or less adopting them as his grandchildren, which is very, very interesting. He has a lot of kids, and sometimes his kids have brought more pain than blessing, but he's choosing to adopt them, which is interesting because here's this guy chosen by God. He's been giving a blessing. And so in his adopting, he's passing on a blessing, yet they're in some definitions pagan. I don't know. It's not so clear Joseph's like religious orientation, much less his wife's orientation when it comes to spiritual things, but he's certainly cultural. They are culturally other.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because for so long, it's, at least for me, maybe, and I think maybe you felt this, especially looking through your different videos on YouTube as well. It's felt like Christianity strives to be an exclusive religion. And it's really weird because no one would ever admit that. Am I right? Like, although there's a feeling of it and maybe even an experience of it, not one, 99% of Christians would be like, no, it's about inclusion.
Sure.
Yet, if you read this passage just in a Christian mind, in a very traditional Christian mind, we're like, why is he giving away the Christian blessings to pagans?
Yeah.
Like, why do they get my blessing? Aren't I a part of the remnant? And it's like, yeah, it's interesting. And I think to me, like a point that comes out is that God is looking to bless people. Like he is not actively trying to figure out whether or not you've lived up to a standard so that he can bless you or not bless you. Like, he is seeking to bless his children, which are human beings.
He's looking for any excuse to give you a blessing. Yeah. I see echoes of like post-resurrection where Gentiles are being grafted in. I don't know if this is the intended purpose of this narrative, but like I can't help but think like here are some people who are technically outside of the lineage, but they are receiving the blessing because of what the Son has done.
Yeah. It's
because
almost
of what
like
Joseph
God
has
doesn't
done.
change.
It's almost like the whole Bible is communicating one massive story of God's love for all people.
Yeah. It's almost like the same God that told them to bring in the Gentiles was doing it the whole time. It's like, I don't know if you've seen, this is maybe a little bit off topic. I don't know if you've seen Parks and Rec where Andy Andy goes in and fakes being a beginner at the guitar, and then he comes out and he's I was a rock star the whole time. And it's almost like we think God in the Old Testament was this kind of like mean guy, and then he figures it out later, but he really comes out in Jesus. He's like, just kidding, guys. I was loving and wanted to bring him in the whole time. You guys were just stopping them. And we see echoes of that throughout the whole Old Testament, like Rahab and all the homies like joining in different ways. And like, yeah, it seems like it was always the goal, the plan.
We've seen it several times in this book specifically. I mean, think about Pharaoh or Abimelech, these, outside of the family lineage, pagan, I think is the appropriate term in these moments. Like they're hearing God intimately, like in their inward parts, they are listening to God's voice as God is directing them and steering them, and they're responsive in a positive manner. So it's very clear that God cares about all these other people. It's not as though that he's just caring about his own club, his own kids, but his intention has been to graft people in the entire time.
Yeah, and I'm getting this picture of God, which I like, is just like this like beautiful being who just wants to adopt everybody. Like there's just a bunch of lost kids that really need like someone to take care of them, someone to love them, and someone to value them. And he's just looking over. He's like, do you want me to be your dad? I'll be your dad. Let's go. Like, oh, you have a friend that wants me to be there? 100%. Bring him in. And yeah, it's a different way of looking at God versus like, do I need to go around and tell people that they're doing things wrong and there's a being out there and he's going to judge you if you don't stop? Or is it like, man, there's this father figure that I know really wants to take care of you and adopt you. And he's been looking for you for a long time.
Yeah. So this story is told in a way that I think is meant to remind us of a previous story. Like it's like the circle just being closed in on itself, because the way that this story is being told is like that Jacob is kind of blind. Now there's two kids that are coming forward who are looking for a blessing, and it kind of oddly reminds us of kind of Jacob's origin story. And I'm wondering what exactly is here. I mean, obviously the guy can't see. There's a parallel there to Jacob's father. There's a blessing. That's a parallel. And then there's this kind of subversive, like the older one actually doesn't get the bigger blessing. The younger one gets the bigger blessing. And so there's kind of, I wonder, was that God leading, or was Jacob just like, hey, one last little jab at Esau?
Yeah. He's like, yeah, I know you're dead in your grave, but you'll read about this in heaven. I almost wondered, what I'm thinking right now is it's a retelling of Israel's story, or Jacob Israel. Yeah, it's a retelling of Israel's story, but now without the deceptiveness and pain and hurt.
Interesting.
Where like, I wonder if at some level it's giving us a glimpse into this is what would have happened if you wouldn't have tried to deceive your way into the blessing. Like you and Esau would have been blessed, and somebody would have been like, wait, you're supposed to bless Esau more than Jacob. And then your father would have said, no, God told me to bless Jacob more, so my right hand is on Jacob. And then everyone would have been like, okay. And then you would have been fine. And I just wonder at some level if it's a retelling. And it's really cool too, because now it's Israel rather than Jacob interacting.
Why is that important?
Because Jacob literally means the deceiver, which is what he lives out when he deceives to get the blessing. But now it's Israel, the one who stands and struggles with God, is the one doing the blessing. And so it's just, it's almost like his identity and destiny have been replaced, so much so that he's led back into the same situation, although a different role in the situation.
Sure.
But now being with God rather than a deceiver, like everything is just fine and it's great and everyone's happy.
Maybe him kind of reenacting this is a way for him to demonstrate trust in God's plan.
For sure.
In that, like, I didn't do it right, but I trust like that God knew what he was doing. And so I'm going to kind of pass it forward in this way, maybe a little bit, where I'm going to subvert the expectation. I'm going to bless the younger one.
Yeah. Yeah. The journey of Jacob is actually, I think it's so underrated. Like we talk about Moses grew so much, Abraham from one place, but like Jacob went from like, I'm going to steal everything because no one's providing for me, to being like, yeah, whatever God says, I'm pretty rested. I'm just resting in that.
It's funny because he absolutely has this like sign off where he's like, God will be with you. And I will take you back to Canaan, the land of your ancestors. But there's still like this, like what's the phrase? Like, but he's just still rough around the edges. He's like, but I'm going to give you an extra portion of the land the land that I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow. He's still like flexing at the very end. He's like, God bless you in this amazing thing, but I killed these guys.
Yeah, man. God bless you, but don't forget how that blessing came. No, I'm just kidding. No, but that is wild. Yeah. It's cool. It's kind of cool. I like when people's personalities kind of come out, because sometimes we get a weird idea of like, when you become a Christian, you become strangely robotic and have no real individualistic thoughts. But he's like, nah. This is still something I want you to know about me. I'm a conqueror. Yeah.
Oh man, I was reading in the cheat sheet, the book that we referred to affectionately as the cheat sheet, and it was talking about how like this is an interesting passage because it shows kind of Jacob's character development. But at the end of the day, the blessing that happens for Ephraim and Manasseh is just not the point. Like at least it's not the focal point of the narrative moving forward. In fact, the focal point of this whole narrative actually isn't even Joseph. Like Joseph's story arc is important for Joseph and the narrative that it's telling. But as we move forward, the hero that emerges, the hero that we're going to see in the blessings in the next chapter that really comes to the forefront is not Joseph. It's not Ephraim. It's not Manasseh.
Not Reuben.
Judah. It's not even Reuben. Yeah. It's not Simeon. It's not any of these brothers, but Judah specifically. And so I just thought that was interesting how it's like all these stories matter. There's a conclusion in the story arc for so many people. And yet God's still like, and the best is yet to come. He's holding a card up his sleeve, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful for me to remember that like, even no matter what's going on in my story, like there is a greater story that's happening. And that like I'm a part of, 100%. But there's a greater story of like what God is doing in this world. And sometimes I get really caught up in my own story and I'm like, this is the story. And it's like, nah, it's important to God. God is 100% focused on my story. But he's also doing something with the whole of humanity. Like he's bringing about something way bigger than just me.
This is a huge side tangent, but it reminds me of a book that I read that was quite pivotal. Did you ever read, what's the name? Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby?
Ooh, that's
fantastic book.
Yeah.
Highly would recommend it. Like I read it years ago. So I'm curious how it would line up with the paradigm that I have right now. But it's a book that talks about like how do you actually experience God for yourself, and it largely, from what I read, distilled down to one simple principle, and the principle was join God where He's already at work. That's how you'll experience Him. And given that idea through the lens of God has a larger plan. My life is important, yes, but He's doing something larger, and when I'm aware of the larger narrative and what God is actually doing on a meta level, and I join Him in that, that's when I actually get to experience something really, really exciting. And it makes me think about like the whole Great Commission. It's like one of the major things that God is doing right now is allowing the revelation of His character via the gospel of Jesus Christ to go around the world. And one of the most beautiful and exciting ways that I get to have an experience with God is when I join Him in that redemptive work.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think it's a gift to be able to be a part of something that's purposeful like that.
It really is, especially when we can do it without a sense of like need and working, right? When it's like, oh my goodness, I need to sell so many books. You and I know what that experience is. You know less than me. But you and I know what that's like to be part of a ministry that measures all the success metrics and all the things that you need to do. And if you don't do enough of the thing, then you're not good enough, kind of a feeling. That's a terrible place to be. It's not fun at all. Would not recommend. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. But when we can do so with confidence that God has already done whatever, we're already valuable, we're free, like all the things, right, that we know are important. From there, when we get to join God in His work, it's exciting because it's no pressure. He's already doing it. It's all His job anyways, but I just get to join Him for the ride. And how fun is it that we get to do that?
Yeah, 100%.
So anyways, this is it's kind of sad. This is the last time on this season of The Move that you and I will be having this conversation. And I don't know that I'm not expecting anything any more deep or more profound than anything else you've ever said. But just in the off chance that there's something that for you has really stood out, something that you'd like to share with our listeners, our viewers, just as you could kind of like wrap up this chapter of this season. Anything that you'd like to say to those who have been moving with us over the last almost 90 something episodes?
Yeah. Well, first off, just thank you for listening. It's been a really big gift for me just to be able to study these scriptures with you, Justin, and also knowing that it's helpful to some other people. And something that's just been huge for me in Genesis as well as all scripture is that, like, God is a God who wants to be known, and that's why he wrote down all of this stuff. Yes, to tell us about the Messiah. Yes, to tell us about all of these like theological points. But I would say almost more than anything, like he put the scriptures here for us to really get to know him because he wants to be known by you as an individual.
Yeah.
And so I just want to encourage you as we leave from this place, maybe leave this season of the move, just continue to open up scripture for the purpose of knowing him, because that's what he wants. He wants to be known by you, and he wants to get to know you more and more. And so, yeah, that's my deepest wish for each and every one of you, and for myself as well.
I love it. Very well said. Hey, if any of you guys are ever in Maui, hit up Pastor Ben. I'm sure you'd love to hang out with listeners of The Move if they ever find themselves in Maui.
For sure.
But yeah, man, I'm hoping that as we get to move forward, that the invisible walls of the internet start to come down, in the sense that, like, I want to meet more and more of you guys in person. It's funny because, we lead Bible studies throughout the week. We're doing internet church, and I know so many people, and I've been journeying with so many of these individuals for months, if not years, and yet the vast majority of them I've never met in person. And so one of those desires that I have is to be able to spend more time physically, like face to face. Because even you and me, Ben, I think we've met in person, twice? Once at Southern,
maybe like 2-3 times, something like that. Yeah.
Once at Southern and once at Pickleball.
We met at Southern.
I spoke for Asian Convocation that one time, remember?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. And also that one time in the summer when I think you were visiting your fiance during her summer camp. So maybe 3 times. That's all I've met. But even then, I don't think we talked at that point in time.
It feels like we've met many other times.
That's
does. Weird. That's weird to think we've only met that many times.
Right? We've literally met less than 5 times. Like, weird. Literally. I'm fairly confident that's accurate.
Very weird.
And yet we can have like just such an extended journey together. Anyways, all that to say, what am I rambling about? I'm rambling to express my desire to hang out with you, Ben, more in person.
For sure.
And listeners of The Move as well. I think that'd be super fun.
Definitely. Well, we'll make it happen.
We'll make it happen. All right, Ben. Thank you again for it all. You've been fantastic. I've learned a lot from you. It's been a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to much more of this. A lot of the same.
Yeah, man. Same. See you guys later.
Peace out, bro.